Well, hello, good morning. Thank you for taking this asynchronous class. You will be watching this on October 25. So today we're going to talk about the qualitative paradigms of research and how these different paradigms have worked in different ways for organizing research in different ways. So according to our revisions and our readings, and also how ethical research has happened, you have seen, for example, examples of what issues in ethics can happen in qualitative research and medical research. So with the Tuskegee case, it became very salient what unethical practice can happen, for example, for medical trials, or also digging into people's traumatic experiences and how important it is for us as researchers to also protect their identities, protect reproducing trauma of different situations in their lives, but as well how to be compliant, being responsible to institutions and protocols of how research should be carried in a way that we can ensure that these practices really speak to the reality of our audiences, but as well, not to overprotect our audiences in a way that they might feel biased to respond in a way that benefit our research or is what we want to hear as researchers, but actually speaks about the reality, right? So you learn about the city training, you learn about the importance of the Belmont report, and how of that emerged, right? So you got the information about how these protocols became important for us, like why you need to get these licenses once you go to grad school or you become part of a research team, and how we are compliant. So for example, in Ecuador, each university has bio protocols, and the University of Cuenca is COBIAS, and San Francisco de Quito, it's IRB San Francisco. So we need in each university where you go, there's an Office of Research and Compliance that revises all these processes. So the research is approved, revised, and is carried under ethical terms. So I just wanted to mention that before jumping into our next section. So this week we'll be talking about specifically about the research paradigms that are in qualitative, quantitative, participatory, and mixed methods research. And pretty much you will be already covered that in your undergrad degree. However, in this week, you must be reading pages 15 to 45 from Creswell book. And when we think about these readings, we have to also revise options for research that pretty much speak about these paradigms in research, right? Like what means to do quantitative research in each field, it's pretty different according to the discipline. So if you're in a medical field, it's very common to talk about, for example, biostats. So biostats, for example, for progressing data about how a medication can be measured in the health of a patient, how chronic illness can progress as a public health issue, and other type of statistics tied to health, tied to public health. For example, in engineering, statistics can be completely different in the performance of machines or experiments and experimental research as well. But in social sciences, quantitative research is pretty much about surveys, exploring demographic, psychographic scenarios, but also coding and also textual analysis. So for example, in social sciences, you can do content analysis that's quantitative. That's pretty much, for example, counting how many times a person refers in text about a thing, how many times something shows up in media or in a novel or in a text. But then also thinking about how we might analyze the nuance of inventions, on the nuance of repetition on social media or technology. So quantitative research can mean many different things according to the field. In education as well, we can measure, for example, things as how many students are complying better with a methodology with other, how a methodology for teaching can be more effective than other, taking tests or standardized tests, or actually measuring performance in a class participation. So quantitative research in each field would be very different as well. However, qualitative research comes very much ingrained with a human component across disciplines. So when we talk about qualitative research, it's pretty much describing more nuanced data about how the human experience can observe a situation, but also how a phenomenon happens, as we have been talking about in the paradigms. But under those paradigms, how we might understand these philosophical assumptions and interpretative frameworks. So there are several frameworks in which we can think about for discussion. For example, which are theories and assumptions we can depart from, but also how philosophical assumptions would be understood. So starting from philosophical assumptions, we can think about how abstracting ideas and beliefs from different researchers' processes can think about it. So in qualitative research, the researcher is understood as a multicultural subject. Why? Because we ourselves go into a field with already our personal biases. So if you think about yourself as an engineer, even thinking about doing qualitative perceptions or going into a field as a quantitative researcher, you already have your biases. You might prefer, for example, doing surveys instead of doing interviews because you think it's more objective, but you also might have your own political views, your ideological views, and those views are tied to philosophical assumptions, ideologies that come from philosophies and epistemologies. So in the page 17, there's a table that's very useful that I'm going to share with you right now so we can discuss it observing together for this class. So it's very important to think about these assumptions in the research process as ourselves, as our researchers that come ingrained in the process of how we work together in a specific paradigm of research. So when we go in a specific field, we have to first acknowledge the self-reflexivity we need to have. It's impossible to say, no, I don't have any biases. We all have it. We all have to acknowledge those biases and how those biases might affect or not the specific outcomes of our research. So, for example, in my specific case, I might come more for a qualitative side. So I might tend and prefer openly to do my research more qualitatively because I believe it allows me to explore better from my own perspective and interest what people believe rather than how many people believe so. I have to acknowledge. So in this specific thing, we have to think about the research and history of tradition, the conceptions of ourselves and the other. So when I think about the conceptions of the other and myself, I have to think about how I think about myself as an individual, about my gender, about my identity, about my positionality in the world as a Latino, as a woman, and what are my personal ethics and politics of research. So what I think about research for myself. And here, people in self-reflexivity tend to be, oh, I'm a researcher, I want to save the world, I want to make everything better for everybody. But we have to acknowledge it's not always not like this, right? We are human beings, we want to sustain jobs, we want to also have personal goals, and we have to acknowledge that, right? So in terms of ethics and politics of research, we have to think about what are our personal drivers, our motivations, to go into this field. So I really recommend each of you to go back in time and think about why I became interested in this field, in this topic, in this career, why I want to know this. Is it because of a personal story of myself? Is it because I think it's profitable and I might become successful in this way? It is because I have ideological goals with it. Is it because I think it's meaningful work, but also it will allow me to have a decent living? So your ethics and politics have to be very clear for yourself, but you also have to learn to balance that out, right? Like it's an exercise of humility, but also an exercise of intellectual maturity, right? So for example, in my case, how I will do this, like I'm particularly interested in science and health communication. Why? Because I am particularly upset in the world about how people drive others making decisions about their personal lives or their economy based on fake news and unsustained information, because I'm a communication professional, right? I believe that people should be able to get real facts and make their own decisions on whatever arenas in their life for their own and take accountability on that. That's my personal statement, for example. So if I'm a person that's facing a chronic illness and I want to make a decision about my survival and my health, I want to know which options do I have. Do I want to survive? Do I do not want to survive? Which are the options according to my budget? Which are the options that are the best for me and my family? But if I'm always driven but limited information, how I'm supposed to make the right decision, right? So if more science would be available, I rather make better decisions, right? At least try to do it. So that's, for example, my personal state. So I depart from that personal story to think like, okay, that's what drives me. That's what motivates me. So I can be more honest in the way that I lay out my methodologies and how I see myself. Okay, I want to be an enabler of methods that allow people to make their own decisions through communication and science. So the second phase comes to theoretical paradigms and perspectives. According to my own views, which would be best paradigms and perspectives. So then you have all the theoretical frameworks. Other people might be driven more to feminism or critical race theory or Marxist theories or critical studies and models or queer theory or post-colonialism, positivism, constructivism, hermeneutics, right? So which of these, according to our readings, mean different things? So post-positivism, what it means as a philosophical assumption, right? Equality in gender, right? Because, for example, in terms of gender, everybody thinks that feminism is like women believing it's better than men, right? No, it's a movement philosophically grained in equality and gender equality, but that also benefits gender minorities. And then it comes to racialized discourses, right? Like why race it's actually a theory that shows that people of different races have different access to opportunities and possibilities in the world. And that comes tied to critical race theory and Marxist theory and cultural studies and so on and so on. So post-colonialism, right? Like what we're living right now after colonialism, like what is the power structures in the world and hierarchies that allow, for example, inequality in countries, inequality in society. So where my topic fits. So positively could be hermeneutics because it's organizing something, understanding more like a phenomenological event, trying to understand how an event has unfolded. Am I more trying to understand the difference in race, if I'm comparing two social groups and how things happen for each other? Is one more powerful than the other? It's not. So all of these theories will come into place. Then comes the phase 3, which is the research strategies and designs. And then I have to think about, okay, according to these philosophical assumptions, which would be the best research design for me, right? So my research design will have to be, for example, thinking about qualitative research in this specific case. What would be my framework? Is it a specific case in a school? Is it a specific case of a patient? Is it a specific case of an industry? So there's other frameworks like ethnography, right? Like we were discussing how we can use personal stories of myself, autoethnography. I can use my own lived experience, thinking about always that in order to autoethnography to be meaningful, at least I have to observe myself in a year in order to collect enough data to build upon something meaningful. And then participant observation or performance ethnography, right? Like if you go and, for example, you're an artist and you wanna talk about the experience of playing music in a specific scenario, or how difficult it is, for example, to be an artist in Ecuador and create events, and from that point on build theory of how other artists can have a model to do cultural projects and so on. And then comes other strategies such as ethnomethodology or phenomenology, and then grounded theory, life history or testimonial, right? Like the life history or testimonials of people that have lived a specific scenario. This is very useful, for example, in history, in medical fields as well, but historical methods. So for example, if we are building up stories of an event, such as, I don't know, these outages of energy and how people is living this, and creating historical memories for this, and then go into action and applied research and clinical research for it. So action and applied research goes more into analyzing an event, proposing actions, intervention, and doing a solution that tackles that event, which is, for example, my field. I like applied participatory research. So phase 4 is methods and collection of analysis. So then we have our tools. So the tools for collecting the data are that final step, right? What I'm gonna do qualitatively, and I'm gonna interview people, and I'm gonna observe as a third party, and I'm gonna observe as a participant, and I'm gonna make artifacts, documents, or records with my ethnography. Am I gonna collect videos? Am I gonna collect photos? And I'm gonna make field notes, which is pretty much from ethnography or autoethnography. Am I gonna use visual methods such as art-based methodologies, for example, or I'm gonna make comics, as Angie was telling us, or how these comics are measured later, right? But also interviewing people, how they live that experience, right? And then going into data management methods. If I already have a database, how I'm gonna manage that data? Am I gonna code it qualitatively under a framework of a theory? Am I gonna use computer-assisted analysis, such as what we were talking before, under a theory such as Atlas DI or NVivo? And then comes the textual analysis methods such as content analysis, critical analysis, multimodal analysis. And then we have focus groups and applied ethnography, right? So there's multiple data collection tools. And phase 5 is pretty much how you interpret and analyze and evaluate that information, right? So this is how you're gonna make sense of the data that you collected to create findings for your research. So how are you gonna find the criteria for judging what you find? So here you need literature. So that's why you do literature reviews or state of the art. Like you're gonna need theories, prior studies, models, theoretical models of those theories to analyze the data you collected, or also using these theoretical models as a framework to organize how you collect the data, what you're going to observe in that data, right? And then it comes practices of policy analysis, evaluations, and traditions, and applied research, right? So that's what it comes out from that. So then why philosophy is important? Because it pretty much shapes the ideas, the assumptions, and the content of everything that has been created, and allows these philosophical assumptions to emerge and create these epistemological frameworks to do our research. So in this specific field, you have to think about this structure to draft your study. So now you have an idea, right? You have an idea. What's going to be the challenge for you? I wanted you to draft a scheme using this table, thinking first from yourself all the way down. You have an idea, you drafted a first discussion board and a first draft of your questionnaire. Now let's think about more with a theory, like look into a theory, a model into your field, and think about a paradigm in qualitative research that can actually work for you. And next session, we will reconvene and discuss about those particular models and theories and how that can work actually for us in our particular field. So the rest of the task for this session is going to be drafting a table such as this one, using the table 2.1 from page 17, and reflecting through the research and through the readings, which could be actually my paradigm, but disclosing and doing that self-reflexivity, which are my motivations to do this specific study. You might choose not to say completely all, but try to do it for yourself. And I'm going to place here a discussion option for you, or like an assignment that's going to be private, for you to revise which are going to be your data collection tools and why. You already drafted, however, some is very broad. I want to be more specific about each of the steps. Which is going to be my paradigm, which is going to be my method, which is going to be my data collection tool, how I'm going to analyze the data. Think about all this structure to kind of outline your study. And we're going to see each other in 2 weeks. Thank you so much.